From street to success, a 12-year journey. John, a middle-aged carpenter with a kind heart, walks through the bustling city streets, reflecting on a day 12 years ago that changed his life. On a cold, rainy evening, he noticed a 10-year-old girl, Emily, huddled in a doorway, begging for food. Moved by her plight, John offered her a meal and shelter. This simple act of kindness blossomed into a deep bond, providing Emily with the stability and support she needed. Years later, Emily, now a successful software engineer, honors John at a high-profile tech event, revealing how his belief in her transformed her life. Hello my friends, I hope all you are fine. This is Narrative Stories channel. Let's start this story. John, a middle-aged man with a warm demeanor, navigated through the bustling city streets. The sun had just begun to set, casting a golden hue over the skyscrapers and bathing the city in a soft amber glow. As he walked, John's thoughts drifted back to a day 12 years ago that had changed his life in ways he couldn't have imagined. The sounds of traffic and the chatter of people around him faded as his mind wandered back to that cold, rainy evening. John had always been a man of simple means, working diligently as a carpenter. He had a kind heart and a steady hand, qualities that endeared him to his clients and friends. Yet there was a restlessness within him, a sense that he hadn't quite fulfilled his purpose. This feeling often led him to reflect on his past, especially on that particular night that seemed so distant yet vividly present in his memory. 12 years ago, on a cold and rainy evening, John had been walking home from work, the city's streets almost deserted under the relentless downpour. His coat was soaked through, and his breath came out in visible puffs in the chilly air. As he hurried along, eager to reach the warmth of his modest apartment, he noticed a small figure huddled in the doorway of a closed store. The girl was young, around 10 years old, with matted hair and clothes that clung to her small frame, drenched and dirty. She was holding a cardboard sign with shaky handwriting that read, "Please help. Need money for food." John's heart ached at the sight. He slowed his pace, his eyes meeting hers. They were wide and filled with a mixture of fear and hope, a look that tugged deeply at his conscience. John approached the girl cautiously, not wanting to startle her. "Hey there," he said gently, kneeling to her level. "My name's John. What's yours?" She hesitated, glancing around as if expecting someone to swoop in and take away her chance of getting help. "Emily," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. John smiled warmly. "Emily, are you hungry?" She nodded, her eyes wide and cautious. "Come with me," he offered, extending his hand. "Let's get you something to eat." They walked together to a nearby diner, John holding an umbrella over Emily as she shivered beside him. Inside, the warmth enveloped them, and John ordered a hearty meal for Emily. She ate ravenously, and as she did, John gently coaxed her story from her. Emily had been living on the streets for several weeks after her mother, a single parent struggling with addiction, had disappeared. Emily had no other family to turn to and had been trying to survive on her own. As Emily finished her meal, John faced a decision. He couldn't bear the thought of sending her back out into the cold night. "Emily," he said softly, "I have a spare room at my place. It's not much, but it's warm and safe. Would you like to stay there for a while?" Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, please," she whispered, her voice cracking with relief and gratitude. John led her to his modest apartment, a small but cozy space filled with handmade furniture and the smell of fresh wood. He showed her to the spare room, which he quickly prepared with clean sheets and blankets. Emily looked around, her eyes wide with wonder and gratitude. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe. Over the next few days, John and Emily began to form a bond. They shared meals and conversations, and John learned more about Emily's past. She was a bright and curious child, despite the hardships she had faced. She talked about her dreams, her love for books, and her longing for a normal life. John listened, offering comfort and understanding. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Emily asked, "Why did you help me, John?" He looked at her, his eyes filled with kindness. "Because everyone deserves a chance, Emily. And sometimes, all it takes is one person to believe in you." Emily smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. John knew that providing temporary shelter was only the first step. He wanted to give Emily the stability she needed to thrive. He began by enrolling her in a local school. The principal, moved by Emily's story, agreed to help her catch up on her studies. Emily was nervous on her first day, but John reassured her, walking her to the school gates and promising to be there when she finished. Every day after school, John would help Emily with her homework, encouraging her to pursue her interests. He noticed her fascination with technology and decided to nurture it. He introduced her to computers and basic coding, something he had a rudimentary understanding of. Emily's eyes would light up as she learned, her mind soaking up knowledge like a sponge. Despite the new opportunities, Emily faced numerous challenges. She struggled with her past trauma and the emotional scars left by her mother's abandonment. At school, she sometimes felt out of place, her experiences making her feel different from her peers. John was always there to support her, providing a safe space where she could express her feelings and fears. Emily's resilience began to shine through. She tackled her studies with determination, often staying up late to finish her assignments and learn new coding skills. John marveled at her progress, proud of the young woman she was becoming. He made sure to celebrate her achievements, no matter how small, reinforcing her confidence and self-worth. As the years passed, Emily continued to excel in school. She discovered a passion for technology, particularly in coding and software development. John's modest apartment became a hub of learning and creativity, filled with books, computers, and coding projects. Emily's grades soared, and she began to dream of a future in the tech industry. In high school, Emily's talent was recognized by her teachers, who encouraged her to apply for scholarships. John supported her every step of the way, helping her with applications and essays. The turning point came when Emily was awarded a full scholarship to a prestigious university, a testament to her hard work and determination. The day she received the acceptance letter, she ran to John, tears of joy streaming down her face. "We did it, John," she exclaimed, and he hugged her tightly, his heart swelling with pride. Emily's university years were marked by hard work and remarkable achievements. She thrived in her studies, earning top marks and gaining the respect of her professors and peers. She continued to stay in touch with John, frequently visiting him and sharing her successes. John's pride in Emily grew with each passing year, his heart warmed by the knowledge that his act of kindness had set her on a path to success. Upon graduating with honors, Emily was offered a position at a leading tech company. She dove into her work with passion, quickly climbing the ranks and earning recognition for her innovative ideas. Yet, she never forgot the man who had given her a chance when she needed it most. John's influence remained a guiding force in her life, his lessons in kindness and resilience shaping her approach to her career and relationships. 12 years after that fateful night, Emily had not only become a successful software engineer, but also an entrepreneur. She developed a groundbreaking app designed to help children from disadvantaged backgrounds learn coding and technology skills. The app gained widespread recognition, receiving accolades from the tech community and educational institutions alike. Emily decided to launch her app with a special event, inviting influential figures from the tech industry, educators, and the media. She also made sure to invite John, though she kept the details of her connection to him a secret. She wanted to surprise him and show him the impact his kindness had made. On the day of the launch, John received an invitation to a high-profile tech event. Puzzled but curious, he decided to attend. As he walked into the grand hall, he felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The room was filled with people, and a large stage was set up at the front. John found a seat, wondering what had prompted the invitation. As the event began, Emily took the stage, her presence commanding attention. She began her presentation, explaining the inspiration behind her app and its potential to change lives. John watched in awe, recognizing the young woman before him, but not yet grasping the full connection. Toward the end of her speech, Emily's tone grew more personal. "I want to share a story," she began, her voice steady and filled with emotion. 12 years ago, I was a lost and frightened child, begging on the streets. A kind man saw me, offered me food, and gave me shelter. He believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. John's heart pounded as he listened, the realization dawning on him. Emily continued, her eyes scanning the audience until they found John. "That man's name is John, and he's here with us today. John, could you please join me on stage?" The room erupted in applause as John stood, his emotions a whirlwind of pride, gratitude, and love. He walked to the stage, tears mingling with his. 3. Full circle. Emily continued, her voice breaking with emotion. "John, you gave me a chance when I had nothing. You showed me kindness and love, and you believed in me. Everything I've achieved is because of you. Thank you for changing my life." She presented John with a token of gratitude, a beautifully crafted wooden plaque with the words, "To John, my guardian and friend, thank you for believing in me." The audience stood in admiration, applauding the profound bond between them. The story ended with John and Emily embracing, surrounded by applause and admiration from the audience. Their journey had come full circle, a testament to the transformative power of kindness, a band, and the enduring impact of believing in someone. The warmth of their connection filled the room, inspiring everyone present to believe in the power of giving and the incredible journeys it could set in motion. Thank you for being a part of Narrative Stories. Your support and engagement mean the world to us. We are committed to bringing you the best in storytelling. What kinds of stories would you like to see next? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
On Thursday, April 17, 2019, at 4:35 p.m., inside the USC General Justice Building at Joint Base Grissom, I finished my coffee and checked my watch. The day had dragged on, and I was eager for it to end. After 3 hours of testifying and answering questions, I found myself in a cramped room with just a TV and my thoughts for company. I'd been waiting for over 2 hours since then, wondering when the board would reach a decision. The door swung open, and Commander Tom Baker, my legal rep, stepped in. "The counsel's done for the day, Lieutenant Jones," he informed me. "That's me, William Jones, or Bill, to friends and family. I'm a senior flight lieutenant in the United States Space Corps, formerly the Space Force, established nearly 80 years ago. They want you back at 8 o'clock tomorrow, so head back to your quarters," Commander Baker instructed. "And remember, avoid chatting with other witnesses, especially your wife." "You mean my soon-to-be ex-wife, the cheating one?" I clarified. He nodded. "Exactly," he affirmed. "Now, Lieutenant, get going and steer clear of trouble." "Aye, sir," I replied, rising. I stretched, grabbed my case, and left. I drove my compact electric car back to the BOQ, where I changed clothes, microwaved a faux meat burger, and grabbed a beer. After a quick meal, I settled into my chair, turned on the TV for news, but found nothing interesting. So I reclined, reflecting on recent weeks. Until recently, I served as the weapons officer on the USS Armstrong, a top spacecraft named after a moon-landing astronaut. It seated 110 crew and boasted formidable firepower: nuclear missiles, energy weapons, railguns, and mini lasers. The Armstrong's maiden voyage to Jupiter was special because my wife, Tabitha, was also on board as the chief pilot. We were high school sweethearts who pledged exclusivity and shared dreams of space exploration. Despite being stationed at the same base, our missions often separated us. While she was away, I delved into GravTac, a martial art suited for low-gravity environments, honing my skills in strength and tactical prowess. I never once doubted Tabby's loyalty. My trust in her was unwavering, never even entertaining the idea of her being unfaithful. Despite occasional temptations, I remained dedicated to our relationship, never envisioning any betrayal. We often fantasized about experiencing closeness in zero gravity on the Moon or Mars. When we both received orders for the Armstrong, it felt like our dreams were coming true. However, what began as a dream turned into an agonizing nightmare. I vividly recall the day of my departure. Friday, January 3rd, 2019, at Canaveral Launch Complex, Florida. Clad in my suit and lost in thought, I boarded the passenger shuttle headed for the Armstrong's orbital dock, accompanied by 20 others. Tabby, serving as the chief pilot, had departed hours earlier on the first shuttle. I followed on the third, with 3 more shuttles set to follow. Seated beside me was Commander Jason Travers, known as Bull for his size and demeanor. I remembered him from our academy days. He had been Tabby's counselor and a strict instructor. Despite knowing him, our interactions were minimal, limited to a few classes. "Excited to serve with your wife, Jones?" asked Bull. "Yes, sir, I am," I replied. "This will make history," he remarked. "Heading farther than ever," I informed him. "Jupiter and back in under 100 days. Quite the mission." As the pumps hummed beneath us, signaling our imminent departure from Earth, Bull ensured everyone was ready. "Time to bid Earth goodbye." "That's it, let it go," he grumbled before reclining. With visors down, we braced for liftoff. The rocket's rumble and the pull of gravity intensified. Through the window, clouds rushed past as we ascended, the sky darkening to reveal the planet's curvature below. The shuttle shuddered as boosters detached, destined for reuse near our launch site. After an hour, I spotted a distant structure. "There she is," Bull announced, lifting his visor. "Docking soon." 30 minutes later, the shuttle approached the open dock, matching its speed. 2 tubular structures extended, connecting with a hiss as pressure stabilized. "There we go," Bull said. "Prepare for some gravity. Ship's at 0.8 G. Knowing the Armstrong's gravity system could be adjusted, I anticipated relief from weightlessness effects like fluid shifts and muscle atrophy. As the crew signaled, a green light flashed over the hatches. Bull stood, signaling others to follow. I unfastened, grabbed my bag, adjusting to the ship's reduced gravity from the shuttle's near-zero gravity. Within steps, I felt the weight of my gear. 4 hours to station launch, folks," Bull announced upon our ship entry. "Let's hustle. 3 more shuttles are right behind us." Knowing our cabin's location, I headed there, hopeful to find Tabby. Though she wasn't present, her belongings filled half the closet, indicating she'd arrived. After stowing my gear and shedding the spacesuit for my flight suit, I grabbed my uniform cap and headed to the bridge, ready to man the weapons console. The bridge buzzed with activity as I ran calibration routines and checked weapon inventories. Ensuring cruise missile platforms and weapon stations were secure, I prepared a report for Captain Alan Simmons, whom I recognized from our time on the Shepherd. Upon the medic's departure, I submitted my inventory, acknowledging our past service together. He signed the inventory, and we verified our key codes. Only 3 people held keys to the cruise missiles: the captain, the first officer, and me. 2 keys were required to launch. "Good to have you with us, Jones," Captain Simmons said. "I hear you're married to our chief pilot." Tabby smiled at this. "Yes, sir," I replied. "Great," Alan said. "Should make the trip more interesting for you." "Yes, sir, I hope so," I said, glancing at Tabby, who smiled mischievously before returning to her tasks. Bull arrived on the bridge, inspecting everything. His icy stare signaled it was time for me to return to my post. "Better get back to my station, sir." Alan nodded and moved on. I returned to my station, confirming all calibration tasks were complete. Everything was in perfect order. Knowing Captain Simmons' penchant for impromptu weapons drills from our time on the Shepherd, I ensured weapons were always ready and the targeting system was calibrated. Each shift started with a calibration check to maintain system accuracy unless a malfunction occurred. Finally, Alan began the pre-launch check while we strapped in. "Operative," he called. "All systems ready for launch," replied Lieutenant Sam. "Engineering," Alan continued. "All systems normal. Proceed to launch," said Chief Engineer Lieutenant Sam. "Weapons?" "All systems calibrated and weapons accounted for," I confirmed. "Comms?" "Communications 5x5, sir," said Lieutenant Denise Simpson. "Navigation?" "Course plotted and locked. ETA at Mars Station is 440 hours," reported Lieutenant Ryan Halcomb. "Number 1? All personnel in place and ready for launch," Bull reported. Alan nodded and pressed a console button. "Houston, this is Armstrong, requesting permission to launch." "Launch authorization granted, Armstrong. Godspeed," came the response. "Roger that, Houston," Alan replied, then instructed. "Spaddock, this is Armstrong. Retract all lines." "Copy that, Armstrong. Lines retracting," came the reply, followed by sharp sounds as the lines retracted. Moments later, we received confirmation that all lines were retracted. "Start the engines," Alan ordered. "Engines running," Brian confirmed. "Take us out, helmsman. Nice and easy. Don't scratch the paint," Alan said with a smile. "Aye, sir," Tabby responded, pulling 2 levers and holding the control column. The ship moved forward slowly, nearing the spaceport exit. We relied on maneuvering thrusters, as firing the ion fusion plasma thrusters inside the dock would damage both it and the Armstrong. Soon, we were clear of the structure. "The space dock is ready," Tabby said. "We'll spiral out of Earth orbit to a point between Earth and the Moon, then fire the big engines. That's the Q spot," she explained. I could see the tracking on the navigator's console. An hour later, the navigator announced, "ETA to Q point is 2 microns, sir. The road is clear." This meant no debris or rocks were detected ahead. "Copy that," Alan said. "Engineering?" "Engines warmed up and ready, sir," Brian confirmed. Alan informed Houston, "Armstrong approaching point Q." "Approaching Q point. Copy that, Armstrong," came the response. We watched the countdown timers, preparing for the launch. At 0 o'clock, Alan said, "Pump up the tires and light a fire, helmsman. Let's see what this girl can do." Tabby's hands moved over the console. "Kicking tires, starting fires." "Aye, sir," she replied, sliding the control levers forward. As the engines roared to life, the force of acceleration gripped us, the hum intensifying with each surge of G-force. We soared at speeds surpassing any human's experience. Casting a glance at Tabby, I beamed with pride, offering a smile, a wink, and a thumbs up. Returning the smile, she glanced at Bull. Sensing Bull's tension, I redirected my focus to my console. An hour later, a foreboding feeling crept in. Bull's posting of the officer's schedule on the bridge didn't surprise me, but seeing myself assigned to the second shift did. In space, time follows Houston's schedule, with dimming lights simulating nighttime during the second shift. While it's not a formal rule, typically, senior officers take the first shift. Seeing Bull place me on the second shift felt like a demotion, indicating limited time for Tabby and me to be together since she'd be on the first shift. If fortunate, we might catch a glimpse of each other during shift changes. To say I was pissed off was an understatement, and Bull knew it. "Is there a scheduling problem, Lieutenant?" he asked. I looked up to see him in front of my console. Alice had also walked over, having seen the schedule and curious about his explanation. "Am I still the senior weapons officer, sir?" I asked. "Yes, of course," Bull replied. "Then why am I working the second shift?" "In my opinion, it's the best place for you," he said, drawing attention. "If you have a scheduling problem, discuss it with the captain through me." By this time, Alan had approached. "Is there a problem, gentlemen?" he asked. "Lieutenant Jones doesn't like the bridge schedule, sir," Bull said. Alan frowned at the schedule. "I understand his feelings, number one," he said. "It's very unusual, don't you agree?" "Yes, sir. Normally I would," Bull said. "But I believe Lieutenant Jones's knowledge and experience are best utilized on the second shift. It also gives us a chance to train other gunnery officers on the first shift." My crap detectors went off. I couldn't believe the crap he was feeding the captain. "Is that the only reason, Commander, or is there more?" Alan asked, clearly skeptical. "If I may speak freely, sir," Bull said quietly. "Always number one," Alan replied. "I've never liked spouses working on the same ship, especially in close quarters. I don't want them distracted from their duties." "That's what I thought," Alan said. "I understand, but I won't let this affect their morale. Make sure they spend time together. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Bull said. Alan looked at me. "Can you do that, Lieutenant?" "Yes, sir," I replied. "Good, carry on," Alan said, walking away. Bull smirked at me. "Don't worry, Jones. I'll keep an eye on your wife," he said before leaving. I turned to Alice, who put a finger to her lips. "Don't say anything, Bill," she said. "We'll talk later. I'll call Lieutenant Robinson." "Yes, ma'am," I said quietly. I glanced at Tabby, who was focused on her console, her face flushed. I couldn't tell if it was from embarrassment or guilt. I left the bridge feeling more humiliated than ever. Something was definitely off. I headed to the galley, hoping to grab something to eat. It wasn't a usual meal time, so I knew the selection would be limited. "Not much available right now, Lieutenant," said the man behind the plexiglass partition. "We have hamburgers made of artificial meat. They taste terrible, but they'll fill you up." "That'll do," I said. He handed me one on a tray and offered a packet of flavored ketchup. "Want some axle grease to make it better?" he asked with a smile. "Sure, why not?" I said, taking the packet. "Thanks." "Anytime, Lieutenant," he replied. I grabbed a small bottle of chocolate milk and found a vacant table. I ate the burger, drenched it in ketchup, and downed the milk. The burger tasted awful, but it filled me up, and the ketchup helped a bit. I put the tray away, tossed the trash, and headed back to my quarters. I lay down, trying to sleep, but couldn't stop thinking about Bull. What did he mean about looking after Tabby? After an hour of tossing and turning, I gave up. Frustrated, I put on my workout clothes and headed to the small gym on one of the lower decks. When I arrived, I was relieved to find the gym empty. Good, I thought. I could vent my frustration without anyone around. I stretched, worked out on the treadmill and weight machine, then adjusted the gravity to 0.4 G. Feeling lighter, I practiced some GravTac techniques for half an hour. By then, I was sweaty and ready to sleep. I reset the gravity, returned to my quarters, showered in the tiny bathroom, set my alarm, and fell asleep instantly. When the alarm went off, I got up, showered, shaved, dressed, and headed to the galley for a snack. It was much better than the faux meat burger I had earlier. I arrived at the bridge just as Tabby was leaving. "Hello, stranger," I said. She looked at me and smiled. "Hi," she said. "I didn't get a chance to tell you, but you did a great job with the launch," I said. "Thank you," she replied. "Maybe I'll come by during my lunch break and we can spend some time together," I suggested. I could see her thinking it over, expecting her to make an excuse. Thankfully, she didn't. "Sure, I'll set the alarm," she said. "Maybe you can eat me instead of one of those fake burgers." "Works for me," I said. "I'll see you in 6 hours." "I'll be there," she said, giving me a quick kiss. I love you too," I replied. I watched her walk away, hopeful we could make it work. Then I turned and saw Bull grinning. "About damn time you showed up, Jones," he said. I checked my watch. "My shift doesn't start for another 15 minutes, Commander," I said. "I just wanted to talk to my wife before duty, if that's okay with you, sir." I thought he might lash out, but he calmed down. "Yeah, all right," he said, and walked down the corridor. I went onto the bridge and took over for Lieutenant Robinson, who handed me my shift and walked out. As I started the calibration, Alice approached me. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I'll be fine, Alice," I said. "Seriously, how are you doing?" she pressed. "It's not easy, but I can handle it." "Thanks for asking." "You're welcome. Listen, I know you have a lot on your mind, but I think you need to keep an eye on your wife and Commander Travers," she said. I looked at her, shocked. "Do you think there's something going on between them?" "Maybe. Call it female intuition, but I've seen little glances between them. Nothing obvious, but there's definitely a spark," she explained. "Got it, Alice. Thanks for the heads up. I plan to meet with her on my lunch break. Hope that helps." "I hope so too, Bill," she said. "Should we tell the captain?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not unless you have solid evidence. Accusing a senior officer without proof can backfire and hurt your career. Just stay alert and keep your wife alert. I'll watch during the first shift." "Okay, Alice, thanks." She nodded and left the bridge. I checked the calibration and inspected the cruise missiles and weapon stations. When I returned, Alan was waiting. "Interested in target practice?" he asked. "Sure thing," I agreed. "All right, launch some drones," he instructed. I set up 5 drones and activated the mini lasers, akin to old miniguns but with intense heat. The lasers swiftly destroyed the drones. "Well done, Lieutenant," Alan praised. "Thanks, sir," I replied. He suggested I'd take the center chair as the senior officer on watch while he rested. "Yes, sir, thank you," I acknowledged, knowing his knack for power naps from past experience. He left the bridge, and I took over his spot. Sitting in the commander's chair, I felt in control, overseeing the ship's activities. Each crew member wore a wrist device, serving multiple functions like timekeeping, communication, tracking, and vital sign monitoring, except during showers. Using the tracking monitor, I located Travers in his quarters, confirmed by his steady pulse indicating he wore the device. Checking for Jones, I found 2 Williams, myself, and Tabitha. Choosing Tabitha, I observed her beacon in our quarters, mirroring Travers' status, asleep with normal vitals. Though tempted to review their tracker history, lacking necessary credentials prevented me. Convinced of their engagement, I deactivated the tracking monitor and focused on other tasks. Looking around the busy bridge, it seemed my presence went unnoticed as everyone attended to their duties. Returning to my console, I double-checked the checklist, finding everything operating as expected. A scheduled course adjustment loomed about an hour ahead, already programmed into the navigation system. The communications officer remained in touch with Houston's flight control, sparing my involvement unless immediate captain intervention was needed. The engineer on duty monitored engine and vital system conditions. The helmsman and navigator ensured smooth ship flight, especially for the impending course correction. After logging the hour's activities, I briefly inspected the weapons console before returning to the central chair. About 2 hours into the shift, Petty Officer Marks took drink orders from everyone, allowing beverages with covers and straws at our stations. After a brief absence, she returned with drinks for all. Shortly before my lunch break, Alan resumed his seat, where I briefed him on the shift's progress. He acknowledged, making notes in his journal. "Thank you, Lieutenant," he said, gesturing for me to take my break with a subtle wink. "Yes, sir," I replied, stepping away from my post. Heading to our shared quarters, I paused at the open hatch, taking a deep breath before entering. Tabby had just woken up to the alarm. "Ready for dinner?" she asked with defiance. Smiling, I joined her on the bed. "Absolutely," I said, initiating affectionate gestures. Subsequently, we shared an carnal moment. "That was amazing," she expressed. "Much needed." "Agreed. Missed you," I confessed. "Missed you too. Love you so much," she reciprocated. "Love you too," I replied. "Time to clean up and head back?" she reminded. Checking the time, I realized there were about 40 minutes left in the break. "You're right," I acknowledged. "Round 2 during your lunch break?" she suggested with a smile. "Definitely," I agreed. Feeling somewhat improved, I rose, showered swiftly, and headed to the galley. Before exiting the cabin, I kissed her, then adjusted the lighting and reduced the gravity to 0.7 Gs, knowing my grasp of Gravtalk was crucial for our performance, an area where Bull lacked expertise. Lovemaking in space is far from the movie's portrayals. In microgravity, blood moves to the head, not the genitals. Fortunately, the ship's default gravity of 0.8 G allowed us some enjoyment, though it remained challenging. Lower gravity could have made it impossible. Testosterone levels decrease in microgravity, potentially leading to heart shrinkage and reduced blood volume. These concerns, along with pregnancy risks, once deterred NASA from sending couples to space. However, tales of romantic escapades persist, like the rumored exploits of a cosmonaut on the Russian Mir station in the 1990s. Despite initial denials, the cosmonaut later admitted to natural desires, but downplayed their significance. He even mentioned a superior's suggestion to bring an inflatable doll to prevent attachment. Although old restrictions lingered, advancements like artificial gravity in the early 2000s made many concerns obsolete. Consequently, the Corps relaxed its stance, allowing married couples to engage in space closeness under specific conditions. After a satisfying tuna sandwich, I returned to the bridge with 2 minutes to spare before the break. Alan greeted me, asking about my lunch. Satisfied, I settled at my console as instructed. Over the next 17 days, Tabby often visited during lunch breaks, offering comfort during the journey. Minimal interaction with Bull eased concerns, and updates from Alice revealed no suspicious activity. Upon arrival at Mars Station, doubts crept in about my initial reaction. After docking with Mars Station, I changed into my Class C uniform, hoping for shore leave with Tabby at Huygens Base. However, my plans were disrupted when Bull informed me of a problem with one or more weapon stations. "What?" I exclaimed, surprised. Just hours ago, during my shift, I had checked them and found no issues. I turned to Lieutenant Robinson, asking if he knew of any problems. He indicated it happened right before docking. Feeling suspicious, I was determined to investigate further. "We've got 72 hours here," Bull reminded me. "Make sure those weapons are ready by launch." Disheartened, I glanced at Tabby. "It'll be okay," she reassured me. "We'll still visit Huygens. I'll bring you back a souvenir, all right?" Bull smirked. "Don't worry, Jones. I'll watch over your wife," he assured me. "Yeah, I bet you will, you idiot," I thought. Alan approached us. "Ready for some beach time?" he asked. "Yes," Bull replied. "But Jones needs to check the weapon systems." "Any issues?" Alan inquired. "The mini laser's calibration was disrupted, sir," Robinson explained. "When did this happen?" Alan asked. "I noticed it before securing the station," Robinson replied. Alan turned to me. "Better take a look, Lieutenant," he directed. "I'll join you," he added. "Thank you, sir," I said, glancing at Bull. "I appreciate it." "I'll assist, Lieutenant," Robinson offered. "Much obliged, Robinson," I replied. "Let's head to the station before the shuttles depart," Bull urged. Tabby looked at me silently. "Do it, number one," Alan instructed. They left, and I noticed Tabby's silence. I turned to Alice. "Something's fishy, Bill," she whispered. "I'll keep watch." "Thanks," I replied. She smiled and walked away. "I'll change into my work clothes," I said. "Which lasers are acting up?" "Number 2 and number 5, sir," Robinson reported. "I'll handle 2. You check 5, but we'll inspect them all," I instructed. "Understood, sir," Robinson said, heading out. I saw Alan contemplating. "I'll meet you at Laser Station 2, I informed him. "I'll be there shortly," he replied. Grabbing my tools, I exited the bridge. After a few minutes, Alan joined me, now back in his work uniform. "What's happening?" he inquired. "Just about to remove the control box cover," I replied, beginning to unscrew it. Upon inspection, I discovered the issue. A gear in the drive system had broken off, with the E-clip missing. "Uh-oh," I muttered. "What's wrong?" Alan asked. "Someone tampered with this device," I explained. "The E-clip is gone and the drive gear is damaged." "Could it have affected the weapons?" he questioned. "Absolutely," I confirmed. "The impact could have wrecked the system. If the lasers were active, they might have pierced the hull." "How could this happen?" he wondered. "It seems deliberate," I speculated. "These devices are sealed, accessible only with a specific tool, like this one," I said, displaying it. "Can it be fixed?" he inquired. "Yes, but it'll take time," I replied. "About 8 to 10 hours, assuming no further issues arise." "Wow," he remarked. "Need assistance?" While I appreciated his offer, the task was solo. "No, sir, I can handle it, but thanks for offering," I said. "There's only space for one set of hands." Just then, Robinson contacted me. "Boss, the E-clip's broken, and the drive gear's damaged," he reported. I turned to Alan. "We need to replace the entire control box," I informed him. "Agreed," he nodded. "Proceed, and get the armory to inspect all weapon platforms." "Understood," Robinson acknowledged. "What are the odds of 2 control units failing simultaneously?" queried Alan. "Highly unlikely," I responded. "These units are typically very reliable. I've never seen one malfunction, let alone 2 simultaneously. They're considered the most stable in our inventory." "Could it be a manufacturing flaw?" he suggested. "Doubtful, sir," I replied. "These units undergo rigorous testing before installation. In my experience with hundreds of them, I've never encountered such a situation." "I'll need to notify Houston," Alan decided. "Let's bring in engineers from the Martian station and postpone a full Level 5 diagnostic. It's absurd that a $1 trillion spacecraft could be halted by a cheap E-clip." I nodded. "Keep me informed," I instructed. "Yes, sir," I affirmed. As he exited the cramped space, I resumed my examination. Upon removing the control box entirely, I noticed a dark stain on the interior hull. It wasn't typical transmission grease. Upon closer inspection, it appeared to be blood. The saboteur had evidently injured themselves in the process. Retrieving tweezers from the toolbox, I carefully collected a sample of the substance. I placed it in a small sealed bag and returned it to the toolkit, planning to have it tested for DNA at a medical facility later. Meanwhile, an armorer replaced the faulty control box. Despite trying to focus on my task, I couldn't shake off the disturbing thoughts. Bull seemed to go out of his way to separate Tabby and me, altering schedules and now this sabotage. His words about taking care of Tabby only fueled my suspicions. The idea of her being unfaithful with him made me furious and sick to my stomach. Knowing Bull had been her counselor at the academy and that they had served together before intensified my concerns. Had something been going on between them all along? After completing the installation and running a dry test, I logged the maintenance entry, lamenting the 10 hours lost that were meant for shore leave with Tabby. Reviewing the log, I found no clues. Robinson confirmed the new unit installation and reported no other issues. Despite knowing it would disrupt his shore leave, I instructed him to conduct a full visual inspection and inventory of all weapons and missiles. He agreed and got to work. En route to the bridge, I visited sickbay and spoke with the on-duty corpsman. "How are you, Lieutenant Jones?" she greeted me. "Would you be willing to undergo a DNA test?" I inquired. "We have the necessary equipment, but final analysis requires verification by a certified lab," she explained. I presented my sample. "I need to identify whose blood this is," I stated. "Can you do that?" "Certainly," she replied. "It will take a few hours, and we'll need to compare it to existing DNA records. May I ask why?" "I can't discuss it at the moment, Chief," I replied. "I just need to know whose it is, and I need you to keep it confidential." She agreed to look into it and promised to notify me of any findings. "Thanks, Chief. I appreciate it," I expressed gratitude. "You're welcome, sir," she responded with a smile. She was quite attractive, and for a moment, I pondered how she would look out of uniform. But the thought passed quickly. Afterward, I proceeded to the bridge to give my report. Alan was at the hatch to his ready room when I arrived. "Fixed it?" he inquired. "Yes, sir," I confirmed. "Lieutenant Robinson is currently checking the remaining systems." "All right, step into my office, please," he directed. Inside, I found Alice and Commander Carson, the ship's senior security officer. Alan closed the hatch and took his seat. "Thank you for your prompt response," he acknowledged, addressing Alice and Commander Carson. "We have a situation," It seems we have a saboteur aboard, Alan informed. 2 weapon systems were sabotaged before our arrival at Mars Station. I've been tasked by Command to conduct an initial investigation and to contact the Core Criminal Investigations Division on Huygens. They won't arrive for at least 36 hours, so you have that time to gather as much information as possible. I'm granting both of you access to the entire tracker history temporarily. I need to know who accessed those weaponized units as soon as possible. This investigation must be thorough yet discreet. Understand? We can't have the crew finding out, he emphasized. We understand, sir, confirmed Commander Carson. In the meantime, a team of Mars engineers is conducting full Level 5 diagnostics on the ship. It'll take about 72 hours. Command doesn't want us departing with a potential saboteur on board, and I concur. The mission might be canceled, Alan explained. Any questions? Just one, sir, I interjected, drawing everyone's attention. Yes, Lieutenant, Alan prompted. I discovered blood on the replaced control box housing. I sent a sample to sickbay for DNA analysis, I reported. Good call, Alan commended. I'll speak with Chief Benson about it. Anything else? We shook our heads. Dismissed. You have your tasks, Alan concluded. Yes, sir, Commander Carson affirmed. Exiting the ready room, I secured my tool bag on the weapons console. As I prepared to depart the bridge, Alice called out to me. Yes, ma'am, I responded. Bill, I've been monitoring Tabby and Commander Travers. It seems they're quite familiar with each other, she disclosed, showing me her phone with pictures. Shocked, I saw Tabby and Bull entering a club hand in hand, dancing, drinking, and engaging in carnal behavior. Then Alice revealed images of them entering a hotel, implying their intentions were clear. I'm sorry, Bill, she murmured softly. I felt you needed to know. Thank you, Alice, I replied, struggling to hold back tears. Will you inform the captain? She inquired. I have no choice but to report it, she affirmed. But I wanted you to hear it first. I appreciate that, I acknowledged. Leaving the bridge, I caught up with Robinson. We completed the remaining system checks and conducted an inventory. My shift ended and I grabbed a snack in the galley before returning to my quarters, attempting to sleep. It was difficult with thoughts of Tubby and Bull swirling in my mind, but I managed to stay awake for a while. Eventually I rose, showered, dressed, and as I prepared to leave, Tabby entered the cabin, appearing refreshed with a glow that often followed closeness. A part of me seethed with anger. Did you enjoy yourselves? I asked calmly. Yes, we did, she replied. Just returned. Sorry you couldn't join. Maybe next time. I remained silent, observing her. What were all the engineers doing on the station? She inquired. Routine maintenance, I replied. What's your plan now? She asked. I'm going to rest for a bit. Exhausted and off duty for the next 12 hours. Are you starting your shift? I questioned. Yes, I affirmed. Did you resolve the issue? She inquired. I believe so, I responded. Good, she said. Missed you out there. Really? That's not the impression I got, I retorted. What do you mean? She asked. I heard you and Bull had fun, I stated. Anything you want to share? We danced, had a few drinks, but that's it, she insisted. Nothing else? I probed. Of course not, she exclaimed, pretending surprise. Why would you think that? Nothing, I said. I have to get to work. As I moved towards the door, Tabby halted me. She attempted to kiss me, but I turned my head, receiving a kiss on the cheek. Bill, I love you, she expressed. What's wrong? You tell me, I replied, leaving the cabin without awaiting her response. I questioned myself about the woman's identity. Did she truly believe she could approach me after being with someone else and expect no reaction? Did she think I wouldn't see through her deception? Upon reaching my station, I noticed Bull's absence. Continuing with my tasks, I carried on with diagnostics. After about 7 hours, realizing I hadn't eaten, I took a lunch break. Deciding to visit Tabby in our quarters, I intended to discuss matters with her. However, upon opening the hatch, I was confronted with a sight no husband should witness. Tabby and Bull were on our bed. I noticed an increase in gravity, set at 0.9 G. They both turned to me as Tabby hastily disengaged. Bull, with a smirk, ordered me to shut the hatch, questioning my presence. As Bull dressed, he mocked me, asking if I lacked lovemaking education. After donning his flight suit, he suggested we talk and motioned for a walk. Addressing Tabby, he promised to return for further conversation. Tabby looked at me with sorrow. I'm sorry, Bill, she whispered. We'll discuss it later, I responded. Bull declined my question and motioned for me to follow him. Sensing trouble, I activated the video recording function on my suit. All our suits were equipped with a camera feature for such situations. I wanted this encounter documented due to my unease. Bull praised my idea of adjusting the gravity in my quarters as we walked. However, he revealed he had discovered my alterations soon after my arrival. When I inquired how long he had known, he corrected my phrasing with a smirk. Remaining silent, I urged him to continue. He shared that it began during his second year at the academy when he served as Tabby's counselor, claiming she had sought his help with a problem. He insinuated that she was susceptible to his charms. He laughed at his own remarks, thinking himself clever. I seethed with anger, but refrained from violence, mindful of my career. "So you're always there for her, huh?" I queried. "Absolutely, Lieutenant," he responded. "You've got a knack for investigation." "Was that why you changed the bridge schedule?" I pressed. "You caught on, Jones," he admitted. "And the weapon system sabotage?" I continued. "Between us, yes," he confirmed, air quoting, "investigation." "What's your next move?" I inquired. "Planning to injure me?" He chuckled, guiding us into the elevator. "Certainly not, Lieutenant," he assured. "Would I take out an officer just for a fling?" "For now, yes," I retorted. He led me out of the elevator, insisting I was mistaken. According to his recent investigation, I discovered my wife's infidelity, grew distraught, sabotaged the weapon systems to frame her lover, and then took my own life when she revealed her intention to leave me. We halted at the starboard airlock, opposite our docked station. The inner hatch was open, all spacesuits removed, and he brandished a pistol. "You figured it all out?" I challenged. "Absolutely," he smirked. "Now into the airlock." "You won't succeed," I countered. He scoffed. "Who'll command believe? You, a failing husband, or me, a seasoned veteran?" he retorted. Assessing the situation, I noted the gravity set at 0.8 G, not ideal, but manageable. Seizing the moment, I leaped up, struck him twice, and locked him in the airlock. Angered, he demanded I release him. "I have one question, Commander," I interjected. "What?" "Did Tabitha know your plan?" "Of course," he affirmed. "It was her idea. Now open the door." "I won't say more," he warned, aiming his weapon at me. "Now do it." Gazing at the controls, I responded, "Yes, sir," and activated the button. His eyes widened as he realized. The outer door slid open, and he was thrust into the vacuum of space. Caught off guard, he struggled, knowing he had only seconds without a spacesuit. In the void, the air in his lungs would expand, causing immense pain. He would either freeze or suffocate within 15 seconds. I activated the comms, announcing, "Man overboard, number 2 starboard airlock." Instantly, the alarm blared, drawing a crowd to the airlock. Alan and Alice rushed over, followed by Tabby. "Commander Travers, sir," I said, handing him a drive with a video recording. He confessed to sabotaging the weapon and having an affair with Lieutenant Jones. He also planned to eliminate me and make it look like self-destruction. It's all here. "Bull!" Tabby exclaimed, peering into the airlock. By now, Bull's ejection had sent him into an unstable orbit around Mars, making recovery difficult. Turning to me, tears streaming down her face, she accused, "You eliminated him. You fool, I hate you." "That's enough, Lieutenant," Alan intervened, taking Tabby to the orderlies. "Take her to sickbay, then hand her over to security." He turned to me solemnly. "You're relieved of duty for the investigation. I'll handle it." "Yes, sir," I responded quietly. "All right, that's it," Alan commanded. "Back to work. We've done all we can here." He turned to Commander Carson. "Once she's settled, find her a berth away from the bridge. Reach out to Mars Station for Commander Travers' recovery." "Understood, sir," Carson replied, walking off. Alan then addressed Alice. "Looks like you're stepping up, Alice. You're my new number 1 until further notice. Adjust bridge duties accordingly. The mission's likely scrapped." "Yes, sir," she acknowledged. "We've wrapped our initial inquiry, sir. We need to go over our findings." "In my quarters, ASAP," he instructed. "Got it, sir," she affirmed, then turned to me. "I'm sorry, Bill," she offered. "You didn't deserve any of this." "Thanks, Commander," I replied, heading to my quarters. Sorting Tabby's belongings, I packed them in her duffel bag. I wanted her far from me, likely reassigned to the vacant chief pilot's cabin. Security later retrieved her things. I didn't inquire, nor did I care. I flipped the mattress and changed the soiled bedding, tossing the old linens into the laundry. With restricted access to my quarters, I settled at the computer console and filled out a divorce request based on infidelity. Since our marriage fell under JAG jurisdiction, the divorce process also involved them. There was no property or children to divide, and our incomes were equal, so support wasn't applicable. It was a straightforward split where she kept hers and I kept mine. After submitting the request, I awaited confirmation. Within 24 hours, 2 CIA agents from Huygens contacted me, hinting at a vengeful motive. During the interrogation, the JAG officer prevented me from making self-incriminating statements. I spent the next day on edge, avoiding crew interactions to sidestep gossip. While seated in my quarters, Alan and Alice arrived unexpectedly, alleviating my tension. "Lieutenant," Alan began, taking a seat. Alice joined, and I relaxed on the bed. "Mars Station recovered Commander Travers' body and confiscated the illegal firearm attached to him," Alan stated. "The CIU report confirms your actions as self-defense. Commander Travers was present at both sabotaged weapon stations, as shown in the tracking history logs," he continued. "Right before Lieutenant Robinson detected the calibration error," Alice added. "The DNA from the blood matches the commander's, along with his confession to you, proving his responsibility for the sabotage," Alan clarified. "Your wife claims ignorance, but she's detained as an accessory to Travers's plot against you. Possible conspiracy charges await her on Earth." "So we're heading back to Earth, sir?" I inquired. Alan affirmed, "Indeed, Bill. The mission's on hold for now. We'll face a board of inquiry upon return." "Can I resume duty?" I asked. After some persuasion, Houston agreed. "With 2 officers down, we need you on bridge duty. Can you handle ops and gunnery?" Alan questioned, turning to Alice for confirmation. "Yes, sir," I affirmed. "Good," he replied. "We launch in 12 hours, so make sure you're rested and ready." "Thank you, sir," I said. "May I speak with my wife? I need some answers." "Are you certain about this, Bill?" he inquired. "Absolutely, sir," I confirmed. After a brief pause, he consented. "All right, Bill," he agreed. "But Commander Brewster will accompany you. Do you agree, Alice?" "Yes, sir," she confirmed. "Very well," he concluded. "Now, get to work, then rest up. It's time you earned your paycheck." "Yes, sir," I responded. As he left, Alice turned to me. "Ready, Lieutenant?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, ma'am," I replied. We exited and headed to the brig on the lower deck. "Just so you know, Captain Simmons has commended you," she informed me. "For what?" I questioned, surprised. "He believes your actions saved lives, preventing potential damage to the ship had Travers fired the weapon in the airlock," she explained. "Damn," I muttered. She grinned. "Congrats," she said. We arrived at the brig and checked in with the on-duty security officer before approaching a small cell where Tabby sat on the bed, clad in an orange jumpsuit. "What's up, Lieutenant?" she sneered. "So now it's just Lieutenant, not even Bill or Lieutenant Jones," I remarked. "Fine, prisoner. I'll ask a few questions and then leave you be." "Go ahead, Lieutenant," she replied, staring ahead without glancing at me. "How long were you involved with Travers?" "Since sophomore year at the academy," she admitted. "He was my counselor." "I know," I acknowledged. "Where did it start?" "Do you really want to know?" she challenged. "Yeah, I do," I affirmed. "All right, since you asked. I failed a test. He helped me cheat. I owed him, so I entertained him. I enjoyed it, so it kept happening," she explained. "So you cheated with him and then betrayed me, is that it?" "Yes," she confessed. "You don't know how many times I thought of him when I was with you. And you know what? I liked it. You know what else?" "What?" I asked, feeling sickened. "He's been places you couldn't reach. Surprised you could even feel me after him," she taunted. "And you enjoyed working with him all those times." "When we could," she admitted. "You know it's hard to do in low gravity. That's why we did it before and after missions." "Did you ever love me, or was it all a lie?" "I loved you," she admitted. "But I enjoyed being with him too. It was just lovemaking, nothing more." "You knew his plans once we boarded, didn't you?" "Yeah, I did. He wanted to stagger shifts so we wouldn't see each other much. But you found a way to talk to me, surprising both of us. So we decided to wait until Mars," she explained. "And you were aware of the weapons sabotage." "I knew he was up to something, but not the specifics," she confessed. "Just that he wanted to stop your shore leave. We didn't think you'd escalate it to this extent, and my supposed self-destruction was a bonus, right? He blamed it on you. Was it?" "It was his idea," she stated. "But you went along. You never intervened, did you?" "No, I didn't," she admitted quietly. "And I'm sorry. I never thought he'd actually do it." "He failed, and you'll end up in jail." "Was it worth it?" "Doesn't matter," she shrugged. "I was proud of you, how you handled the ship. I loved you. But now, I regret ever meeting you. I'll testify at your trial. Goodbye." As I turned, she called my name, apologizing. Without looking back, I raised my middle finger and walked away. Upon returning to Earth, Tabby was incarcerated in a federal prison for the duration of the investigation and court-martial. Crew members, including myself, Alan, and Alice, testified extensively, enduring days of waiting for developments. My divorce was approved in early April, with the JAG officer handling the remaining paperwork. On Friday, April 18th, we assembled in the hearing room. Alan, Alice, and I sat together while Tabby entered in chains, flanked by armed prison guards. Council members, distinguished by their decorated uniforms, joined the proceedings. Admiral Cartwright, leading the council, initiated the meeting. "Please sit," he began, clarifying it as a board of inquiry rather than a trial, aimed at uncovering what occurred and preventing future incidents. After summarizing the events of the Mars trip, he condemned Commander Travers for prioritizing personal agendas over duty, resulting in endangerment and ship damage. Directing his attention to me, he acknowledged my role. "Senior Lieutenant William Jones," he said, causing me to pause. After a moment, he continued, commending my actions for potentially saving lives and preventing sabotage. Recognizing my diligence, he approved the Distinguished Service Medal recommendation and assigned me to the Advanced Operations School for training starting June 1st. "Thank you, sir," I said. The Admiral acknowledged and shifted focus to Alan. "Captain Alan Simmons," he addressed. Alan stood attentively. "The Council acknowledges your efforts amidst unprecedented circumstances. We recognize your reluctance to challenge senior authority and the unique challenges you've faced. However, as the ship's captain, you bear ultimate responsibility for its operations." "I understand, Admiral," Alan replied. "The Council affirms your command of the USS Armstrong, but notes an entry on your record. Given the ship's modernization, a new crew assignment will be arranged. We propose promoting Lieutenant Sam Dr. Brewster to commander for the first officer role. Expect updated mission orders soon," he concluded. "Thank you, Admiral," Alan acknowledged. Then the Admiral turned to Tabby. "Senior Lieutenant Tabitha Abernathy," he addressed, using her maiden name post-divorce. Tabby rose with the others. "This board expresses profound disappointment in your conduct. You've not only disgraced your ex-husband, but also tarnished your uniform and the service as a whole. Your involvement in this affair, unintended pun aside, may have endangered the lives of many, including your ex-husband. Your statements, along with Travers, led us to reassess your entire record, including your academy performance. Travers' intervention helped you pass a critical test without which you might not have obtained your commission. While your piloting record was commendable, it's evident you should not have been commissioned. Your liaison with Travers resulted in tragedy and endangered lives. Your actions are incompatible with your role. We recognize your pending court-martial, but this board has advised the Personnel Office to revoke your commission, demote you to an E-1 crewman, and reduce your pay, effective immediately," he informed, signaling the guards to escort her out. As she approached us, she paused, tears streaming down her face. "Bill," she started, her voice trembling. "Address me cautiously, crewman," I retorted sharply. She straightened up, tears still flowing. "Request to address you as lieutenant denied," I snapped. "Remove her from my sight," I instructed the guards, who promptly complied as she sobbed. At that moment, her words held no significance to me. "A detailed report of the Council's decisions will be sent to each of you and added to your records. This Council session is adjourned," announced Admiral Cartwright, closing the meeting with a gavel strike. We rose as the Council departed. After their departure, Alan turned to me. "Well, that wasn't too bad," he remarked. "How about a drink? I could use one." "I think it went rather well, sir," Alice chimed in. "Why not?" I agreed. We exited the premises and headed to the O Club, where we continued to savor our victory. Update. Standing at the airlock to Galileo Station, orbiting Mars's dark side, I reflected on the past 17 months. Tubby's court-martial had ended a month before I entered the School of Advanced Spacecraft Management. I testified for the prosecution, though recalling my time with her and Bull on Armstrong was unpleasant. This time, Tabby appeared different, wearing a crewman's uniform without flight wings. She had visibly lost weight, her eyes sunken and sorrowful. Losing everything she cherished, her rank, wings, and former husband, she faced a bleak career outlook. Her record would forever bear a stain, barring her from piloting any spacecraft. As the court convened, we rose until instructed otherwise. The judge inquired about the verdict, and the senior member, a full commander, announced guilt for Tabby as an accessory to my attempted homicide, but acquitted her of conspiracy. The defense argued a lack of direct evidence implicating her in the conspiracy. Yet it was clear she knew of Travers' plan to eject me into space and took no action to stop it. The judge sentenced her to 10 years of hard labor in federal prison, followed by a dishonorable discharge. With a gavel strike, the case concluded. Tabby left in chains, never acknowledging me. I attended my class in Florida near Cape Canaveral and relished the training, along with the pleasant weather and surroundings, which included plenty of exposed skin. Graduating after 18 months, I was promoted to lieutenant commander and received orders to Galileo, a secluded station orbiting Mars, unlike the visible Mars station. I was intrigued by what lay ahead. Upon arrival, I was greeted by Captain Hawkins, an attractive officer, who briefed me on the situation and assured me of a smooth transition. "Are you prepared to see your new home for the next few years?" she asked, leading me to the observation deck. Pressing a button, she revealed a massive, advanced ship, the USS Enterprise. "This will be your domain as my operations officer. Ready for adventure?" she asked, her eyes gleaming. "Absolutely, Captain," I replied. With a laugh, she informed me of our imminent launch in 15 days and assigned me daily briefings. "Welcome aboard, Commander," she said, shaking my hand before departing. As I admired the ship, I couldn't help but smile at the sight of the USS Enterprise emblazoned on its side.
It all started slowly. You know how it is, small things, nothing too alarming at first. Elizabeth, my wife of 6 years, began acting off. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was work stress. We all go through phases, right? But then those small things started piling up, and I couldn't ignore them anymore. She'd leave for work earlier than usual and come back late, claiming there were extra meetings or deadlines. I'd be sitting there, waiting for her to come home, and when she finally did, she'd barely acknowledge me. She was always glued to her phone, her face lit up by the screen while I sat across from her, feeling invisible. The laughter that used to fill our house gone, replaced by cold silence. I'm not proud of it, but one night, curiosity got the better of me. She'd left her phone on the kitchen counter, and as I was cleaning up, I noticed a message pop up. It was a short one, something like, "Can't wait to see you." My heart sank. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did. The smile on her face when she read that message. I hadn't seen her smile like that in months. Not around me, at least. That's when the doubts started to creep in. At first, I tried to convince myself that it was nothing. Maybe a friend from work. Maybe a harmless conversation. But the anxiety, it grew like a poison, eating away at me day by day. The change in her behavior wasn't just in my head. There was something else going on, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't good. I started paying more attention to her. The little details that I hadn't noticed before suddenly became obvious. She changed her phone password, which wasn't a big deal, but why the secrecy all of a sudden? We used to be open about everything. We'd share our days, our thoughts, even stupid little memes. But now, nothing. The affection that used to flow so easily between us was gone. Every attempt at intimacy was met with a cold shoulder or some excuse about being too tired. I tried to chalk it up to stress or maybe something personal she wasn't ready to talk about, but that excuse wore thin after a while. The distance between us grew, and I found myself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering where it had all gone wrong. And then came the rumors. You know how mutual friends can be. Sometimes they mean well, but when you hear something like, "Oh, I saw Elizabeth having lunch with that guy from her office," it sticks with you. The same guy. Over and over again. I didn't want to believe it at first. Hell, I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who thought every interaction was something more. But when the same name kept coming up in different conversations, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I felt like I was going crazy. There was no way I could just come out and accuse her. What if I was wrong? What if I was just imagining it all? But what if I wasn't? That's when I turned to Sophie. Sophie lived next door. We'd been neighbors for years, and she was always a friendly face. She'd gone through a rough divorce a couple of years back, so I figured if anyone could give me some perspective, it was her. We were having coffee on my porch one afternoon when I brought it up. I didn't dive right into it. I'm not that blunt, but I kind of danced around the subject, mentioning how Elizabeth had been distant lately, how I wasn't sure what to think. Sophie didn't say much at first, just listened. Then she hit me with a question that stuck with me. Do you trust her? I remember being quiet for a long moment. The truth was I didn't know anymore. I wanted to, but that seed of doubt had already taken root. And no matter how much I wanted to believe it was nothing, I couldn't. Sophie, being as perceptive as she is, didn't mince her words. She told me that she'd seen situations like this before, where things change and people start hiding parts of their lives. She didn't flat out say Elizabeth was cheating, but she didn't rule it out either. Instead, she told me to keep an eye on things, to pay attention to the details. People who've got nothing to hide don't hide anything, she said, and damn if that didn't hit hard. I spent the next few weeks being more careful. I wasn't going to blow up my marriage over rumors and suspicions without solid proof. But I watched. I waited. Every little thing she did, every late night, every message she quickly hid on her phone, it all felt like a piece of the puzzle. It's weird because the more I watched, the more it felt like I was drifting away from her emotionally. Like I was already preparing myself for the worst. I'd catch her laughing at something on her phone and wonder, is that for me or for him? And every time she kissed me goodnight without even looking me in the eye, I could feel the knot in my stomach tighten. Sophie and I talked more often during this time. She became my sounding board, the person I could vent to without judgment. She never pushed me one way or the other, but reminded me that I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't imagining things. One night, after too many beers, I spilled everything to Sophie. I told her about the message I saw, the rumors, the coldness at home. I felt like an idiot for not confronting Elizabeth directly, but I didn't have the guts. Sophie didn't laugh. She didn't tell me I was stupid. Instead, she leaned in and said, John, you need to find out for sure. Don't drive yourself mad over this. But be careful. And so, I became the detective in my own marriage, trying to piece together a puzzle I wasn't even sure existed. After that conversation with Sophie, things escalated quickly. It wasn't like I had planned for this to happen, but once the seed of doubt was planted, I couldn't just sit there and let it grow wild. I needed answers. I couldn't keep living in this weird limbo where I was constantly second-guessing everything Elizabeth did. It was driving me crazy, eating me alive from the inside out. Sophie had a way of making everything seem so normal, like it was totally reasonable for us to start keeping tabs on my own wife. I didn't even feel guilty about it, which looking back now, maybe I should have. But when you're in the thick of it, when you're convinced your wife is sneaking around behind your back, guilt takes a back seat to survival. We started small. I didn't want to come off as paranoid or desperate, so the first step was to keep an eye on her phone. Every now and then, when she'd leave it lying around, I'd pick it up, scroll through her messages, check her social media. It's insane how quickly people forget that their phones are a window into their private lives. But Elizabeth was smart, smarter than I gave her credit for. Her messages were clean, too clean. No signs of anything suspicious. If she was talking to someone, it wasn't happening in her regular chats. Probably using some encrypted app or deleting everything right after. I don't know what frustrated me more, knowing that she was hiding something, or not being able to prove it. That's when Sophie suggested we take things up a notch. You can't just wait around for her to screw up, she told me one evening as we sat on my porch. It was late, and the moon was hanging low in the sky, casting this eerie glow on everything. You need to start tracking her movements. Be smart about this. At first, I thought she was joking. Like, what was I supposed to do, follow my wife around like some detective? But Sophie wasn't joking. She was dead serious. We'll do it together, she said, leaning in closer, her voice low. You're not in this alone. And that's how it started. Sophie and I began alternating shifts, watching Elizabeth. When I was at work, Sophie would keep an eye on her, and when I had time, I'd check in with friends or acquaintances to see where she was. It wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. Elizabeth's routine was predictable, except for the moments when she disappeared for those mysterious lunch meetings or late nights at the office. Sophie and I had this weird rhythm going. It felt like we were partners in crime, each one of us playing our part in unraveling the truth. We'd meet up afterward to compare notes, share what we'd learned. Over time, those conversations became less about Elizabeth and more about us. I can't pinpoint when it happened, but somewhere along the way, I started looking forward to seeing Sophie. She wasn't just helping me figure out my wife's betrayal anymore. She was filling a void that had been growing in my life for years. The more distant Elizabeth became, the closer I felt to Sophie. We'd sit on her porch or mine, drinking beers, talking late into the night. At first, it was just about Elizabeth, but soon enough, we were sharing deeper things. Our fears, our disappointments in life, and the things we wished we had done differently. She had this way of looking at me, like she understood everything I was going through without me having to explain it. Her eyes, damn, I hadn't had someone look at me like that in years. Not since before Elizabeth and I started drifting apart. It felt good to be seen again. One night, after a few too many beers, I let it slip. What if she really is cheating? What the hell am I supposed to do then? Sophie didn't even hesitate. You don't just catch her, she said, leaning closer, her voice almost a whisper. You get your own satisfaction. You deserve it, John. After everything she's put you through. Her words at me like a freight train. The idea of revenge, of turning the tables on Elizabeth, hadn't even crossed my mind until then. But once Sophie planted that seed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why the hell should I be the one sitting here, tortured by her betrayal, while she's out there living her best life with some other guy? It wasn't fair. I deserved better than that. The more time I spent with Sophie, the more I realized how much I'd been missing in my marriage. It wasn't just about the sex, though let's be honest, that had been lacking for a long time, but about the connection, the intimacy. I hadn't had someone listen to me, really listen to me, in years. Elizabeth was always too busy, or too tired, or too distant. But Sophie? She was there, fully present, and I found myself getting lost in those late-night conversations, in the way she looked at me, touched my arm when she laughed. And yeah, I'll admit it, there was a part of me that liked the danger of it all. The thrill of sneaking around, not knowing what would happen next. It was intoxicating. We didn't just spy on Elizabeth anymore. We planned. We started mapping out the times when she'd be out, piecing together her routine, looking for patterns. It wasn't hard to see when she'd sneak away for lunch with that same guy from her office. I started recognizing his name when I heard it, even though Elizabeth never mentioned him to me. It was like we were building a case against her, and with every little detail, every late-night meetup, I felt more justified in what we were doing. Sophie became my rock during that time. I don't know how I would have gotten through it without her. We were in this together, and it wasn't just about Elizabeth anymore, it was about us. Something was growing between us, something I hadn't expected. One night, after another evening of investigating, Sophie and I were sitting on her couch, talking about life, when she suddenly leaned over and kissed me. I didn't stop her. Hell, I didn't want to stop her. In that moment, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. It wasn't just about Elizabeth anymore. It wasn't about proving her wrong or catching her in the act. It was about me, what I needed, what I deserved. And Sophie, she was right there, giving me everything that Elizabeth had taken away. The lines between revenge and desire started to blur. Sophie wasn't just my ally anymore. She was my escape. She made me feel alive again. And even though I knew my marriage was crumbling, part of me didn't care. I was already too far gone. The day everything changed started out like any other. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at my coffee when Sophie called. I've got something, she said, her voice low and serious. My heart leapt into my throat. For a second, I thought I might be sick. We've been watching, waiting for weeks now, but nothing had materialized. Until today. She's meeting him, Sophie continued. Tonight. There's a reservation at that fancy Italian place downtown. 8 o'clock. I didn't know how she'd found out, and honestly, I didn't care. All I could think about was that this was it. This was my chance to see everything for myself. No more guessing, no more wondering if I was just paranoid. Tonight, I get my proof. But then the dread hit me like a wave. Could I actually handle it? Watching Elizabeth with him? I wasn't sure if I had the strength for that, and the thought of it gnawed at me for the rest of the day. It felt like my insides were being twisted and wrung out, the anticipation of what was coming almost worse than the betrayal itself. Sophie, as usual, was steady. She came over in the afternoon, sitting with me in the living room while we went over the plan. We'll go together, she said, her voice calm, almost soothing. We'll sit at a table nearby. You don't have to confront her if you're not ready. Just see for yourself. That's all. I nodded, trying to keep my composure, but inside, my stomach was churning. Sophie had a way of keeping me grounded, though. She talked me through everything, step by step. Where we'd sit, how we'd act. Don't look at her too much, she advised, her hand on my arm. We don't want her to know we're there right away. Let her get comfortable. I had no idea how I was supposed to act normal while my wife sat with another man a few tables away. But Sophie was right. This was the moment of truth, and I couldn't let it slip through my fingers. When the time finally came, I was a mess of nerves. I barely remember driving there. The restaurant was one of those upscale places we used to go to on anniversaries. Dim lighting, candlelit tables, the whole romantic atmosphere that now felt like a cruel joke. We walked in together, and my heart was pounding so hard in my chest I thought everyone in the room could hear it. Sophie had already made a reservation for us, strategically placing us at a table with a clear view of where Elizabeth and James would be sitting. The hostess seated us, and I tried to breathe, tried to act like I wasn't about to watch my whole world fall apart. Sophie ordered wine. I couldn't even think about eating. My palms were slick with sweat, and I kept glancing at the entrance, waiting for them to walk in. Sophie, calm as ever, poured me a glass of wine and told me to sip it slowly. "You've got this," she said. "We're just here to watch." And then they walked in. I don't know what I was expecting, but seeing Elizabeth with him was like a punch to the gut. There she was, my wife, looking beautiful, radiant, even walking in with this guy like it was the most natural thing in the world. They laughed as the hostess led them to their table, just a few feet away from where Sophie and I sat. I froze, unable to take my eyes off them. James. I finally put a face to the name I'd been hearing for months. He wasn't anything special, just some average-looking guy in a suit. But the way he looked at her, I could tell there was something there, something more than just colleagues. They sat down, and I watched as they got comfortable. James leaned in close, whispering something to Elizabeth that made her smile. She laughed, a soft, genuine laugh I hadn't heard in a long time. It was like watching a stranger. This wasn't the woman I married. This was someone else entirely. Someone who was happy, carefree, with him. It tore me apart. My chest felt like it was being crushed, and for a moment I thought I might get up and leave. I didn't know if I could sit there any longer and watch them. But Sophie's hand found mine under the table, squeezing it gently. "Don't break," she whispered. "You need to see this through." So I stayed. I watched as they held hands across the table, as James leaned in and kissed her on the cheek, as they smiled at each other like they were the only two people in the world. My blood boiled. I wanted to stand up, flip the table over, and shout at them. But instead, I sat there, fuming in silence, feeling my heart break with every second that passed. Sophie didn't say much as we watched. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough to keep me grounded, to remind me that I wasn't alone in this. Every so often, she'd lean over and whisper something in my ear, calming me down when my rage threatened to spill over. And then at some point during the dinner, she dropped the suggestion. "You know," she said, her voice low and almost playful, "if you really want to get to her, maybe it's time we made our move." I turned to look at her, unsure of what she meant. Sophie gave me this sly smile, her eyes glinting in the dim light. "You want her to know that you know, right? Let's give her something to think about." Before I could respond, she leaned over and kissed me, right there in front of everyone. It wasn't just a quick peck on the lips. It was slow, deliberate, and calculated. When she pulled away, she glanced over at Elizabeth. And sure enough, Elizabeth's eyes were locked on us. Her expression was frozen, the laughter and light in her face vanishing instantly. I don't know what came over me, but in that moment, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Elizabeth had been playing her game for months, and now it was my turn. If she wanted to cheat, fine, but she wasn't the only one who could play dirty. Elizabeth didn't confront us right away. No, she tried to hold it together, tried to keep her cool as she and James continued their dinner, but I could see it in her eyes. She was furious. Her gaze kept flickering over to our table, her body tense, her movements stiffer. Sophie smirked, leaning in closer to me as we continued to enjoy our meal. We talked, we laughed, though none of it felt real. It was all for show, all part of Sophie's plan to push Elizabeth over the edge. And it worked. Halfway through the meal, Elizabeth couldn't take it anymore. She stood up abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor, and stormed over to our table. "What the hell are you doing?" she hissed, her voice low, but sharp enough to cut through the chatter of the restaurant. I looked up at her, calm as ever, and shrugged. "Having dinner. What's it look like?" Her eyes blazed with anger. "Don't play games with me, John." But this time, I wasn't the one playing games. Sophie squeezed my hand under the table again, reminding me that I had the upper hand now. Elizabeth's world was about to come crashing down, just like mine had months ago. As I sat there, watching Elizabeth's face twist in barely controlled rage, I couldn't help but feel a sick sense of satisfaction. The tables had turned. For the first time in months, I wasn't the one left in the dark, wondering what the hell was going on. I wasn't the one feeling powerless. She was. I could see her struggling to keep it together. She glanced back at James, who was still sitting at their table, looking confused and slightly annoyed. Then she looked back at me and Sophie, her eyes narrowing, her breathing quick and shallow. She was furious, and I knew she was seconds away from exploding. When Sophie leaned over and kissed me again, this time longer, deeper, it was like Elizabeth's entire world shattered. Her fists clenched at her sides, and without warning, she lost it. "Are you fucking kidding me, John?" she screamed, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the restaurant. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. Suddenly, every pair of eyes in the room was on us. I could feel the tension thick in the air, the anticipation of what was about to unfold. I didn't respond right away. I just sat there, letting her words hang in the air, watching as she came unglued in front of everyone. It was surreal, almost like I was watching it happen to someone else. Sophie sat back, calm as ever, a satisfied smirk tugging at her lips as she sipped her wine, completely unfazed by the chaos. Elizabeth took a step toward our table, her voice rising even louder. "You sit here, kissing her, while I'm with James. Are you seriously that pathetic? You think this makes you any better than me?" I finally met her gaze, my voice steady as I spoke. "No, Elizabeth, this isn't about being better. It's about the fact that you've been lying to me for months." She opened her mouth to argue, but the words didn't come. Instead, she stood there, her face red with fury, her chest heaving. People around us were starting to whisper, murmurs spreading through the restaurant as more and more eyes focused on our table. I could feel the collective judgment, the silent stares of strangers who were now spectators in the destruction of my marriage. "I'm not the one who's been sneaking around behind your back," I added, my voice low but firm. "You think I didn't know?" That was the moment she snapped. "You don't get to play the victim here," she yelled, slamming her hands on our table. Glasses rattled, and a couple sitting nearby flinched in surprise. "You're nothing but a spineless coward, kissing her in front of me like some fucking child. What, you think this is revenge? You think this makes you look like a man?" I could feel my pulse quickening, the heat rising in my chest. But before I could respond, Sophie stood up, cool as ice. "I think he looks like a man who's finally done with your bullshit," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. Elizabeth's eyes darted to Sophie, and for a second, I thought she might take a swing at her. The tension between them was palpable, like two predators circling each other. But instead of violence, Elizabeth turned her rage back on me. "You think this is over?" she spat, her voice shaking with anger. "You think you can just sit here flaunting this trash in front of me, and I'll just walk away?" That was when the staff stepped in. "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to calm down," one of the waiters said, approaching cautiously, like Elizabeth was a ticking time bomb about to go off. But she was beyond reasoning at this point. She shoved his arm away, her focus solely on me. "You're a fucking joke, John," she screamed. "You and your pathetic little revenge plot. You think I care? You think this bothers me?" Her voice echoed through the restaurant, and now the entire place had come to a standstill. People were staring, phones were out, recording, capturing every second of her meltdown. I could hear the clicks of cameras, the beeps of people sending messages. My heart raced, but I didn't stop her. This was her doing, and I wanted everyone to see it. "You're the one who destroyed us," I said, my voice steady but loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Not me." Elizabeth recoiled, her face twisting into a mask of contempt. But there was something else there too. Something vulnerable, like she hadn't expected this to unravel so publicly, so completely. She took a step back, looking around as if realizing for the first time just how many people were watching. And then, like a switch had flipped, she turned and stormed out of the restaurant, pushing past the waiters, past James, who sat there in stunned silence. She didn't even look back as the door slammed behind her. For a moment, the room was dead silent. Then slowly, the whispers started again. People murmured, some laughing, others shaking their heads. The waitstaff tried to restore order, apologizing to nearby tables, but the damage was done. As Sophie sat back down, she smiled at me, raising her glass. "To new beginnings," she said, her voice soft but full of satisfaction. I sat there, my mind reeling from everything that had just happened. I wasn't sure how to feel. Part of me was still in shock, but there was another part, a darker part, that felt relieved, almost satisfied. Elizabeth's public breakdown was a confirmation of everything I had suspected. There was no going back now, but the fallout wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next day, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. At first, I thought it was just the usual emails, messages. But when I checked, it was something else entirely. My phone was flooded with notifications from social media, messages from friends and acquaintances. A video had surfaced. The video. Someone at the restaurant had filmed the entire confrontation. Elizabeth's meltdown, the shouting, the insults, everything, and posted it online. It didn't take long for it to go viral. Thousands of views within hours, the comments piling up, people sharing it left and right. The title was brutal. Wife loses it after catching husband with another woman. Karma at its finest. I clicked on the video, watching as Elizabeth's face filled the screen. Her voice distorted slightly by the low quality, but the fury clear as day. I saw myself in the background, calm, detached, and then Sophie, sitting there like she hadn't a care in the world. The comments were savage. This chick got exactly what she deserved. Imagine being this unhinged in public. LMAO, I don't know who that guy is, but he handled this like a boss. As I scrolled through the messages, I could feel the strange mix of emotions bubbling up inside me. There was a part of me that felt guilty, knowing that Elizabeth's life was about to implode in the most public way possible. But another part, maybe a bigger part, was enjoying it. Her reputation, the one she had built up so carefully, was crumbling. People were calling her out, mocking her, picking apart every moment of that video. By the end of the day, it had tens of thousands of views. Everyone was watching her unravel, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. And the strangest thing? I didn't feel sorry for her. Not one bit. Elizabeth had betrayed me, lied to me, and now she was paying the price for it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. There was no going back, no fixing things. She had ruined us, and now the world knew it too. After the restaurant blow-up, life took a sharp turn. There was no hiding or sneaking around anymore. Sophie and I made things official, and within days she was staying over more often. It wasn't just about revenge, it was real. She filled a gap I hadn't even realized was there for so long. There was laughter again, deep conversations, and the kind of comfort I'd forgotten was possible. With Sophie, I could finally breathe, and my life felt lighter, even in the middle of all the chaos. Elizabeth, on the other hand, was dealing with the fallout from her public meltdown. The video of her losing it in the restaurant spread fast, thousands of views within days. The comments were brutal, people mocking her behavior, and soon it reached her workplace. I heard from mutual friends that her reputation was in tatters. The whispers started, people questioning her professionalism, and she became the subject of jokes at the office. Elizabeth had always been careful about her image, but now that image was shattered. Then there was James. The moment the drama got too big, he disappeared. I wasn't surprised. He didn't want to be associated with her anymore, especially after the video went viral. He ghosted her, leaving her to clean up the mess on her own. She tried to reach out to me, though. At first, it was just a few texts. Simple, vague things like, "Can we talk?" or "I miss you." I didn't respond. Then came the apologies, the confessions that she'd made a mistake, that she wanted to fix things. It was too little, too late. One day, she showed up at the house. I opened the door to see her standing there, looking broken, her eyes red, her face pale. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days, barely holding it together. "John, please," she begged. "Can we talk? I messed up, I know I did, but we can fix this." I just stared at her. The woman standing on my porch wasn't the confident, put-together Elizabeth the first once knew. She looked desperate, pathetic even. "There's nothing left to fix," I said, my voice cold. I didn't feel angry anymore. Just done. Her eyes flicked to the inside of the house, and that's when Sophie walked into the room, casually putting an arm around me. Elizabeth's face dropped. She knew it was over then. The tears stopped, her expression hardening. Without another word, she turned and walked away, and just like that, the last bit of hope she had was gone. After that, Elizabeth didn't try contacting me again. The text stopped, the call stopped. She was on her own. From what I heard, things weren't going well for her. Her job was in jeopardy, her friends were keeping their distance, and James had completely ghosted her. The life she had built was falling apart, all because of her own choices. Meanwhile, my life with Sophie was solid. She wasn't just someone I'd teamed up with to get back at Elizabeth. She was someone I genuinely cared about. We built a life together, and it felt right. It was easy, it was fun, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had something to look forward to again. Elizabeth was just a memory now, a part of my past that I'd finally left behind. And as I moved forward with Sophie, I realized how much better off I was without her. It's funny how things work out, isn't it? If you'd asked me a year ago where I saw myself, I never would have guessed it would end like this. Sitting here now with Sophie by my side, I've had a lot of time to think about everything, about how far things went, about the choices I made, and about the man I became in the process. Revenge was never the plan, at least not in the beginning. I just wanted the truth. I wanted to know what had happened to my marriage, to the woman I thought I knew. But once Sophie and I started digging, once I saw the truth for what it was, it became more than that. It became about getting even, about taking back control of a situation where I'd felt so powerless. And I did. I got my revenge. Watching Elizabeth's life unravel, seeing the pain on her face as she realized I wasn't the fool she thought I was, it felt good. It felt right. For a while. But now, as I look back on it, I wonder if it was really worth it. Was it worth the mess, the anger, the public drama? Could things have been different if we had been honest with each other from the start? If we'd actually communicated, maybe we wouldn't have ended up here. Maybe the betrayal wouldn't have hit so hard. Maybe I wouldn't have felt the need to go to such lengths to expose her. But life doesn't work like that. We made our choices, and we're both living with the consequences. Elizabeth, I think about her sometimes, not in a way that makes me miss her, but in a way that makes me wonder if she's learned anything from all of this. The last I heard, she was still trying to pick up the pieces of her life. She's alone now, struggling to rebuild her career, her friendships, her reputation. I guess part of me does feel a little bad for her. Not because she didn't deserve it. She did, but because I know what it's like to lose everything you thought was solid. There's no satisfaction in knowing she's suffering, not anymore. The satisfaction came in the moment, when the video went viral, when the whispers started at her office, when her lover James ghosted her like she was nothing. But now, I moved past it. The anger, the resentment, it doesn't have the same hold on me that it used to. I've found something better, something real with Sophie. And that's what matters. Sophie, she's been my anchor through all of this. What started as a bond over shared pain turned into something much deeper. She's not just the woman who helped me catch my wife in a lie. She's the woman who's given me a new reason to look forward to life again. With her, I don't have to pretend. There are no secrets, no hidden agendas. Just us moving forward, building something new. It's strange how betrayal can open up possibilities you never imagined. If Elizabeth hadn't cheated, if we hadn't gone through that mess, maybe I'd still be stuck in a loveless marriage, blind to the fact that I deserve more. Sophie showed me that. She reminded me that life doesn't have to be about pain and resentment. It can be about growth, about finding someone who truly sees you, who makes you feel like you matter. I think that's what I'll carry with me from all of this. Not the revenge, not the satisfaction of watching Elizabeth's life fall apart, but the realization that sometimes you have to go through hell to find your way back to happiness. It wasn't pretty, and it sure as hell wasn't easy, but I came out the other side stronger. Wiser, maybe. I learned that I can't control what people do, but I can control how I respond to it. And I chose to move on, to let go of the bitterness, and to embrace the new chapter of my life. As for Elizabeth, I don't know where she'll end up. She's still out there trying to fix what she broke. Maybe she'll find a way to put the pieces back together. Maybe she won't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. I'm done looking back. The last time I saw her, standing on my porch with tears in her eyes, I realized something. She wasn't the villain of my story. She was just another flawed person, like me, who made terrible choices. We both did. But the difference is I've learned from mine. I've moved on. She's still stuck in the consequences of hers. So here I am, sitting in my house, no, our house with Sophie. The woman who helped me through the darkest time in my life is now the light I never knew I needed. We've built something good, something strong. And as I look toward the future, I can't help but feel like I've finally found my peace. It's funny, isn't it? How life throws curveballs at you when you least expect it. But sometimes those curveballs lead to something better. And for the first time in a long time, I'm not looking back in anger or regret. I'm just looking forward. I caught my wife cheating on me with her assistant. It actually got me promoted, but she had to suffer a lot. Got my revenge. My wife, I'll call her Sarah, and I worked for a pretty big not-for-profit in Western Canada. This particular organization is in the public eye and has a lot to do with politicians, and for the last 8 or so years, our organization has been trying to get a certain agreement signed and recognized by the federal government. Anyways, without getting too into the details of that, my wife's position meant that she was constantly on the news and working with big wigs and traveling the country and kissing people's butts. I guess literally and figuratively now. I found out she was cheating on me with her assistant that she hired about 6 months ago. She was in the Department of Stairs and me in the registration department. We actually met at the organization 8 years ago. We both started within a few months. We both worked our butts off to get into the positions that we're in now. It wasn't easy, and obviously, like I said, she kisses butts and she's super charismatic and has a way with words. When she speaks, people listen. When she walks into a room, she demands people's attention. I'm a little more introverted, and for the years, that really worked for us. Well, I ended up having some health troubles and had to go on a short-term disability, so I wasn't at work for a little bit, and this is sort of when it all started. Or at least when I figured something was up. Some things to note, I'm almost positive that her assistant didn't know we were married. I'm sure of this because he would look at me strange when I brought her lunch or brought her coffee in the mornings. He looked at me as if like, who the heck are you? He knew who I was and that I worked in the building, but I'm not sure that Sarah ever told him who I was to her. I mean, it's not like we went around the building saying, hey, we're married. But like the people who work there, no one gossip travels fast around the organization because people like drama and like starting drama, which is why I ended up finding out that things were going on. A little background info. Sarah is 45 and I'm 43. It turns out that we actually went to the same high school, but it was a bigger school, so our paths never crossed. We have 2 kids. We have a son who's 7 and a daughter who's 5. They literally are the loves of my life, and I truly believe my life didn't start until they arrived. We hit it off right away, and at the time it was a big deal that we started seeing each other at work because it was against office policy to date anyone that you worked with. Technically, Sarah and I never really worked together because we dealt with such different issues. But when we had company-wide meetings, obviously we'd see each other there, and sometimes the projects I was working on would overlap with what she was dealing with upstairs. Eventually, people just let it slide, and it just became another thing. And like I said, we never screamed it off the rooftops and nobody seemed to mind. Not only that, but when you work in an office, people get kind of crazy. People flirt with everybody, and my wife is attractive. I will say that, and I constantly heard it from other people, and I even heard it from a lot of the female staff. People in an office space get kind of horny. It's sort of pathetic in a way. So her assistant, I'll call him Trevor, he's 29. He has a political science degree. I'll admit it. He's a good-looking guy. And there was only about 12 men in the whole building compared to like 40 or so women. So we were outnumbered. And when Trevor started, these single ladies literally pounced at him. From the start, it seemed like Sarah could have cared less. She seemed all business. She didn't even bring him up to me really. I knew that she was hiring an assistant, but I didn't know that she hired a male. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But when I saw him and saw how good looking he was, I sort of understood why she didn't say anything. And at one point, she even said that he reminded her of me, but a younger version of me. And in another time, she said that Trevor was the version of me if I didn't get in my own head. And I took a different career path. I was sort of offended by that. How am I supposed to take that? When I found out that she hired him and didn't tell me for a few weeks, I asked her why. She said, "Why is it such a big deal?" And then she laughed in my face, and she said that I felt threatened by a little boy. I'm like, threatened? And she's like, "Yeah, you're jealous." And yeah, I guess I was in some way. And yeah, maybe I was threatened. But I tried to argue to her that her omitting the fact that he was a guy and was good-looking sort of made a point. And she said I was being ridiculous because I wouldn't have had the same reaction if it was a good-looking woman. And I was like, yeah, okay, true. But would she still have slept with him and made comments that he reminded her of a young me if it was a woman? No, not only that, but I heard our secretary asking her questions about Trevor, and they'd both be giggling, another red flag. Yeah, okay, I was jealous, but who wouldn't be? Not only that, but I wasn't feeling well physically. So it was really eating away at me. I wasn't feeling my best. I wasn't my best. And I knew it. And I feel like Sarah really took advantage of that. So yeah, I go on short-term disability. And this means I'm at home for a couple of weeks. I become the main caregiver for my kids. And Sarah starts to work really long hours and goes away on trips. So when she was on these trips, she took this assistant with her. And then she's posting pictures on Instagram of herself in clothes that aren't really professional, or like on the beach. And I can tell that she has no bikini top on. The photo is just of her, but I know that he's with her. I comment on the photo and I'm like, scandalous, but she doesn't react to it or anything. Then I creep Trevor's page. He's got a public page and see that he's in fact posting photos of the same beach, but it's of the water. But then I know that they're together, and I know that my wife is laying on the beach next to him without a bikini top on. I text her and I'm like, should you be posting photos of like that on Instagram? And she's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you're not wearing a shirt and you're showing a lot of skin. Do you think that's smart to be doing when you have a position that you do? People look up to you. And then we got in a huge fight and she didn't talk to me for the rest of her work trip. And I say that lightly, work trip. She was sleeping with him at this point. And another note, yeah, these work trips took her all over the country, and she get time for business and pleasure that disgust me now. But I'm trying to just get through this with self-deprecating humor because that's the only way I'm surviving right now. But yeah, she'd have free time when on these trips. This particular trip was on Kelowna, British Columbia. So it was nice weather, and she knew she'd have some time for the beach apparently. While she was there, I was taking care of the kids. I don't mind this at all. But what I did mind was the fact that she was having relations with someone other than me, her husband. It's embarrassing because everyone in the office knew this. They'd stay at work late together. They'd constantly be in meetings with a closed door and closed windowed blinds. But she tried to argue that she was having meetings about confidential things. Oh yeah, confidential, all right. A woman at work who didn't actually like her very much, Angela, ended up telling me recently that she heard moans and slurps and all kinds of atrocious sounds coming from that room. Angela and Sarah shared an office wall. And the thing about this office building is that it was gifted to us and it didn't have as many offices in the building originally. When the organization started, we literally didn't have any money. So we had to just make do and throw up walls. Some of the office walls in this place are paper thin and weren't meant to be permanent. And if Angela would have told me about these noises she heard back then, I would have just thought that she's saying this to complain about Sarah because she doesn't like her. But after it all came out and I caught them red-handed, I don't doubt her for a second. I'm getting ahead of myself. So she's spending a lot of late nights there. And there's whispers going on about how close they're getting and whatnot. I'm in total denial. I can't believe she'd ever do anything like that to me. She posts more pictures on her Instagram, and it looks like someone is taking these photos of her. These photos look like they're in really intimate restaurants, dark, candlelit places. When she comes home after going out like this, she claims they're business meetings. And I sort of say they look like really intimate business meetings. And with my particular sickness at the time, I was having a hard time and she never, not once, asked how I was doing. She was always too busy working, and I can't remember the last time she was home to say goodnight to our kids. Even our kids were asking, "Where's Mommy? When's Mommy going to be home? I miss Mommy." It broke my dang heart. And what do I tell them? Oh, Mommy's working. Mommy's trying to help her citizens. Nope. Mommy's just cheating on Daddy and throwing her family away. Anyways, one particular evening I get a text from a number I didn't recognize, and it was like, "Get to work right now. You're going to want to see this. Don't call your wife. Don't let her know you're on your way. But head for your office." And like weird, I tried calling the number, but it just disconnected. So I call my mom to come over to be at the house because my kids were sleeping and I didn't want them to wake up to go. So she comes over and asks if everything is okay. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I just have to go help Sarah with something." So I go and park down the road so she can't see my car in the parking lot. I sneak into the side door with my key card. The lights are off in the building, but when I go upstairs, I can see that the lights in her side of the building are still on. It's long after everyone has gone home for the day. Too long after, in fact. And then I walk slowly up to her office. The door is open, and I see Trevor just giving it to her on the desk. She's been over, and she looks up and sees me. I'm just standing there. She has to hit Trevor to stop. And then she quickly pulls her skirt back down, and he quickly zips up his pants. And all I could say is, "Wow, Sarah." And it's the same old story. She tries to tell me that she can explain everything. It's not what I thought. And then I'm trying to walk away, and she's pulling at my arm, and I'm trying to brush her off. Trevor doesn't come out of her office, but I'm trying to make my way down the stairs and back out the side door. She's following me, and then suddenly she switches gears, and she starts getting mad at me for catching them. She's like, "Who told you? Why are you here? You didn't trust me, did you?" And that last one made me laugh. I said, "You clearly haven't given me any reason to trust you. I mean, what did I just walk in on?" But she's getting mad at me. She starts saying that I'm insecure, and she can't be with someone who's like this. And then she starts attacking my illness, and she's saying things that I'm not the man she married, and I'm weak and bringing her down. I literally had to tell her to shut up and not come home. I got on my car and drove back home. So somehow work got around to what had happened, and people from work started texting me, asking if it was true and if I was okay. Yeah, in that order. Shortly after that, I was supposed to get off of short-term disability. I asked to work from home for a little bit until I figured out what I wanted to do and how I was going to handle the situation. I knew that Sarah had the ability to pull the plug on my job, but I didn't want to lose my house or my kids, so I knew I needed this job. I needed to figure out my next move. First, I contacted my lawyer, and I told them I wanted to start the divorce process. Well, where I'm from, we have to separate first. So I was like, "Okay, yep, let's do that." Then a few days after that, I got a message from the same random number that texted me before. It was a video, and the video was all shaky, but you could tell there was Sarah and Trevor making out in her office again, on her desk. They were wearing different clothes, so it wasn't the same night that I caught them. Then another message came in, and it was another video. This time it was of Trevor and Sarah making out in her car in the parking lot. I saved them. All I replied was, "Thank you." And they responded with a thumbs up emoji. I sat there for a while wondering what I was going to do. I had to make it good. Then I knew there was an election coming up. And what I mean by that is that the person Sarah worked for had to be elected back into office. And the only way Sarah was going anywhere was if the person she worked for didn't get voted back in. So I contacted the person who was the opposition to Sarah's boss. I also happened to know that this person had a really good chance of getting in, but just needed a little bit more endorsements. I figured that this whole thing with Sarah could really look bad for Sarah's boss and their campaign. Well, when I contacted the opposition, I told them everything and sent them the videos that had been sent to me. I started endorsing this person, and as soon as this happened and the videos ended up getting spread all over the office. It totally divided the office. The organization had some really tense energy around it, and the whole process took about 5 months. During those 5 months, I had to go into the office and pretend like nothing was happening and that Sarah and I weren't going through a separation. But it was awkward. I'm not going to lie. And Trevor ended up getting let go. I don't even know exactly when, but Sarah let him go, and then she hired some 18-year-old intern. The intern was a girl. But not only that, as soon as these women at the office found out I was single, They were coming at me left and right and center. I hadn't had this kind of attention in years, and honestly, it felt good. Surely I flirted back. I'm not ashamed to admit that. But I'll never crap where I eat ever again. Then there, done that. My wife, sucker punched me with a good-looking F-boy. Sarah tried to come home a few times and was apologizing, and she said she missed the kids. But I said she was never around before. She never mentioned anything about missing me or the kids. So the only thing that changed is that she's going to lose it all in a matter of months. Legally, I had to give her some visitation rights. So she did have the right to come and see them at scheduled times. But I wouldn't be there. My mom was in the house though while this was happening because I didn't actually trust Sarah. She was very much the person who would try to pull a fast one and lock me out of the house or attempt to brainwash the kids against me. I wasn't going to let that happen. Anyways, when the election came, Sarah's boss didn't get in. Eureka! Sweet, sweet revenge. Within a week, the opposition came in and they hired someone else to be there, Sarah. Not only that, but I was given a $15,000 promotion. We still have a bit to go on this road to divorce, but I just wanted to share my story. Think twice about dating anybody at work. You never know who you'll catch bending them over the desk you chose together. As for the messenger, I did end up asking Angela if it was her, but she was adamant that it wasn't. She thinks that maybe it was one of these women here that wanted to shack up with me for themselves. I like to think that it's Angela and she'll just never admit that it was her. I think she just really saw her chance to get rid of Sarah and took it.